Welcome to the Garlic Marketing Show, our continuing series on EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System, and marketing, how to figure it out. And today we're going to talk about staffing companies and how they should be marketing, how things are changing, and how they can incorporate using EOS with Derek Pittak, who's an expert in it, who's worked with staffing companies, helped them grow. We're going to get into this conversation. Before we get started, remember this is brought to you by storycruise.com. It's the ultimate resource for finding videographers all around the world that know business, that know marketing, and used by many running EOS, including Gina Wickman. The most powerful videos for you to start with are your client stories, not testimonials. To learn why you should never ask for testimonials and instead get 4 to 10x marketing results using Vizio case stories, go to storycruise.com/EOS to get started. All right, Derek, we had a long conversation about Disney World. We will, maybe we'll make that a whole nother episode of how to bring kids to Disney World, but thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ian. I'm really excited to be here. Thanks so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. And so we're going to talk about staffing companies, the mistakes they make in sales and marketing, how to change those, and the big mistake that's really preventing them from succeeding in marketing. But before we get started, let me learn a little bit about you. How did you get to working with staffing? How did you get into EOS? How'd you get here?
Yeah, no, thanks so much. So my story is a little bit different. Not your typical serial entrepreneur at all. I'm more of an operator. But my life story is pretty simple, pretty quick. Veteran, served in the Air Force for 4 years. Worked for the Department of Defense for another 6-7 years. By the age of 30, the ripe age of 30, I was pretty burnt out with the government, and I had an opportunity to go into banking. And in banking, I worked in corporate procurement, and I was handed the HR category, which had staffing in it. So that's how I cut my teeth or fell into staffing, as most folks in the industry talk about their entry into staffing. And I had a $120 million budget to manage for the bank.
Wow.
And they were said, could you fix this? It's a broken process, and we need some efficiencies here. So I implemented a new tool and process and management system around it. And I got to know one of the local staffing owners in Cleveland, Ohio. And I actually had to ask him to step away and almost fire him from a part of the engagement. And 6 months later, he asked me to come work for him. So it was a really unique situation. I didn't know 100% if this was the right thing. And honestly, the staffing industry gets a bad rap sometimes with the type of industry, almost like used car salesman. But the more I got to learn his story and what the industry stood for about putting food on the table for people, helping people realize their potential and learn new skills so that they can grow personally and professionally. Such an awesome story. So I took that leap of faith, ran strategic projects for him. And a year later, he promoted me to be his chief operating officer. And we found this thing called EOS, right? And he said, as we scale and buy companies and grow organically, we really need a system, an operating model in which all these organizations follow the same processes and language, et cetera, et cetera. And over that time, a couple of years in, I fell in love with EOS. And we had a right person, right seat conversation about where he wanted to take the business and where I wanted to go. And it just so happened to be that EOS was that place for me in being an implementer. So he invested in me to go start my entrepreneurial journey. And now I said, what a great way to give back then to work with the staffing industry. So that's primarily my customer.
Awesome. Awesome. So when it comes to implementing EOS for a staffing company, what were some of the unique challenges that you had that were specific? Because staffing obviously operates in a little different way and you have a different product. There's a lot of other moving parts going on. How was it unique to implement EOS for staffing?
That's a great question. I think one of the biggest challenges to overcome within staffing is one of them, and you're very familiar with this, is knowing EOS intimately, is the accountability chart, right? Mm-hmm. And so how do you structure the right accountability chart for a staffing company? Your product is a person, and it's a very sales-driven industry, right? So a lot of times you have organizations that have recruiters that also sell, right? Or they bring people in that they start them off as a recruiter, ultimately to put them in a sales position. So it's a very unique combination of who truly owns your sales and marketing seat and who owns your operations seat. And operations, and many times in staffing, is recruiting. So really, and especially then when you have a branch model, right? So if you think of X location, they've got 7 branches in the tri-state area, right? Who's ultimately accountable for revenue and generating activity, right, throughout those different. So getting that right is always critical, and it always has to be customized as we teach in EOS, right? There is a basic function, but at the end of the day, it has to work for them. And it's been tried a couple of different ways. And ultimately the leadership team has to buy into it and push that down throughout the organization and get the buy-in.
I think that's an important thing to think about. So, building that accountability chart and having those people, how did you go about doing that? Because an accountability chart is one of those things that people kind of think about and like just have the roles, but obviously in a staffing company, it's different too. What were the keys to building a good accountability chart?
I mean, I think it all starts with, as we teach a lot of times, right, is forgetting the past, right? And we talk about using it as a tool, most people think, well, how can a piece of paper be used as a tool, right? And it is not an org chart where it's just name and title, right? We want name, function / role, and major roles and responsibilities. So when you think about that and think of the construct of what do we want this to look like in 6 to 12 months? So if we can be strategic enough to design something that is role-based and it lets everyone in the organization know what everyone does. So for example, if your title is Chief Enthusiasm Officer or Chief Culture Officer, nobody knows what you do, right? And so we want to take that down to the bare bones of if it's HR, let's just call it human resources so that everybody in the organizations knows what you're responsible for. And the strategic component becomes when you have a growth plan of 10x this year, right? Or 10%, let's say, or 15 or 20% when the industry's growing at 3. That's highly aggressive. So part of that becomes, well, what are the things that you need to do this year to hit that number? It might be double our sales force. It might be open in 2 new locations. So we have to design the accountability chart with the future in mind so that we can use it as a tool for how we get to where we want to go, and also issue solve when we have leadership management and accountability issues for who's not doing their job and things of that nature.
Obviously, this is the marketing show. I love talking about EOS, but I want to bring it back to marketing. And, what marketing roles do you hire for first? I mean, are you hiring outside or are you bringing someone inside, especially at a staffing company? Because a lot of times, marketing is kind of like, I've worked with staffing companies. You've probably seen it's like we hire a couple of interns, right? And that's our marketing. Yeah. Intern's going to post some stuff. And maybe we'll talk to someone on Fiverr. How did you go about developing that role, and what roles do you develop first?
Yeah, that's wonderful. So whether it's outsourced or whether it's internal, right? The point is getting it down and who does it. That's okay. You see organizations really depending on the size of when they bring on a marketing resource versus outsourcing. Typically, I'll see 10 million and under firms that they might have someone internally that is more of an administrative role that takes on some light marketing functions, right? Some campaigns and social media, et cetera, but then they'll outsource a component, right? And there's a handful of firms in the industry that are specific to the industry. And so typically in a lot of cases, you see them go to companies like a Haley or Parka or Echo Gravity or Clear Edge and a couple others that are out there. But generally speaking, once you get a little bit larger, right? So I've seen companies in the teens hire a marketing resource, a generalist, if you will, and they play in a bunch of different areas, and maybe they outsource just a small amount. And then once you start getting to a certain size, right, 25 million or more, right, then you're starting to build out some semblance of a team, and that team can still be a one-person shop. And then once they get to double that size, they know they got to bring on another marketing individual. But even if you think about $100 million, $120, $30 million firm, they have an internal shop a lot of times, and it might be 3-4 people. So and the type of company also depends on if you are a larger firm, right? Are you all one brand? So if you're a $500 million company and you're one national brand, you might only need a smaller shop, right? Because you're very process driven on what that marketing machine looks like. But if you're an organization and you think of a talent launch out of the Cleveland area, right, that has a national footprint, or like an Adecco or a Kelly or some of the really big players where they have different brands, you need different marketing for those brands, right? So once you start customizing a little bit heavier, you may need a bigger marketing team.
Gotcha. What was the first marketing role that you all hired for? Did you hire internally when you were growing the staffing company that you were talking about?
Yeah, when I was at Talent Launch, we had when I was put into the COO role or the integrator role, if we're using the EOS language, One of my first functions was understanding what our current marketing team was doing and really making that paradigm shift from really content marketing and creating flyers and, making the website look pretty, right? But it was high dollar, high value, ROI driven activity, starting to get in the digital game a little bit more and really start focusing on what's SEO look like, how are we spending with our job boards, and right, because that's a massive advertising spend for the industry, or recruitment spend as they call it, but marketing owns that in a lot of cases. And so really getting a few key players on the team that had a higher level skill set, right? You think about what you need at a $50 million company for a skill set versus a $500 million company, right? Those are different skill sets for sure. So my first action within that was to bring in a really tried and true director of marketing. So I went out and found my guy, brought him in, and then we started focusing on more on what are the really, really critical things that drive and connect sales and marketing together. Because I think that's one of the critical pieces that people miss, is they think marketing is just some fluffy, put some stuff out there and just to get to know who we are, make our website look really flashy. No, we care. We believe that marketing and sales is heavily connected. And if we're doing the right activities on the front end to nurture all those engagements and that activity, we're going to see it turn around. It just takes time and people have to be willing to stick with it.
Oh yeah, for sure. We talked about that beforehand, the importance of sticking with it. You mentioned SEO. What were some of the key things that you saw in staffing, and you see now, the key metrics that a staffing company should be looking at and looking to move when it comes to marketing?
Yeah. So, leads are huge, right? And where are we getting those leads? So are we getting those, what's that funnel look like? Are we getting that activity from people popping in our website? Because while staffing is not e-commerce, right, that website does have some activity driven things that we want from it, right? We want less probably on the client side that are coming to the website to like order a temp, right? We're not talking about that. It's not Amazon, but we have candidates coming into the website, right? Because they're applying to the jobs that are on the website, and those jobs may be an internal job board, or they've outsourced that job board to somebody else to lay it over the website. So we care about what that funnel looks like in staffing. So how many folks are applying to our jobs? Where did they apply, right? So was it an Indeed source? Was it a Moz, or was it Career Builder, right? Was it LinkedIn? Trying to get all that data really, really tight of where the candidate funnel started, how much did we spend to get, what's our cost of acquisition, if you will, right? To get that candidate in the door, and did they apply? Were we able to place them? So tracking that funnel from, if you think rec to check, but in a staffing world, right? It's the time they apply to the time they get placed, and all that activity in between. So really being able to capture and understand that information is critical. And I'll tell you that a lot of times it's really hard for companies to be able to find that information out. So the tighter they can get their integrations with their applicant tracking systems, their CRMs, all the tools that they're using is heavily important.
My name is Gino Wickman. I decided that I want to start to put great video content out to the world. And so the goal was one great video every week. And so I was introduced to Ian, and that's what brought me into this video world and got me embracing this video world and having a great strategy around putting videos out to the world, because there's so much more than just shooting a video. And so the way that he positions those videos, optimizes those videos, he's done a great job.
Man, that's a big thing to think about, right? And how did you go about doing that? Whose rock was it? Was it your director's rock? Was it someone else's? Tell me about that.
Yeah, so what I will tell you is some of the things that when we learn best, we learn through failures, right?
Mm-hmm.
And failing forward was something that we heavily believe in doing, right? And I think, assigning a rock to the director of marketing, the person who owned the marketing function, right? So let's start building a scorecard. Let's get something out there so we can start tracking that data. And what we started finding, right? He hired a digital marketing. So the next person, you asked me that question earlier, going back to that a little bit, is get that marketing leader in seat, right? Understanding what skills and gaps. You talk RPRS, right? As in the EOS language, right? People rate seats, do they GWC their role, things like that. So we overhauled that entire division. And then we brought in a digital person to really start to help us understand our data. right? And the data integrity matters so much to make sure that you can get that funnel right. And so I think that that was one of the biggest things of okay, went through a massive project or rock or series of rocks to really get data cleaned up so that we could start seeing the funnel much, much further, because marketing spend or advertising spend has gone up significantly in the industry with the likes of Indeed and those other big players out there like a ZipRecruiter. And so staffing companies, right, if they're going to dump just thousands and thousands a month into that spend, you have to be able to track it well. So that was an ongoing effort, right? I would say as a rock to get it set up, and then to really be able to track that data as efficiently and not as manually as you want. It's not that easy of a task. So I will tell you, in my time there, I wasn't the most successful at making sure that was a crisp and clear picture. But I will tell you that that's how you have to do it to be able to get the right picture of your data. And so that you can start understanding ROI and connect it 100% to marketing.
And, as when you go in now into outside staffing companies, are they open to doing this? Are they open to looking at that data? I mean, because if they didn't have it before, it's kind of scary and daunting to get it. And then you have to do something with it, and then you have to fix it, and you have to understand it. And you have to try new things out, and it becomes, I don't want to do anything. Are they open to moving forward with this?
I'd say you'd have to start small. Right. And so when you talk about companies, there are a lot of companies in the industry now, especially the smaller organizations, they're asking a lot about marketing, and they're asking a lot about digital. And I think there's probably a misunderstanding with a lot of folks out there as to what digital actually truly is. And really understanding it's not just updating your website. There's so much more than it is to just keyword searches, right? And tying that to SEO and all that good stuff. But if you talk about like, what are the things that matter in an organization from a marketing and sales perspective, right? There's 4 things, and I'm stealing this from Butler Street and Mike Jackett's How I Love You so much if you ever listen to this, but talent acquisition and talent retention, client acquisition and client retention. If your marketing activities aren't touching one of those 4 things, we're wasting our time, okay? So that's probably one of the biggest things I preach to clients, because everyone's hearing about automation, everyone's hearing about candidate and client engagement, right? There's a couple of really cool tools out there that are doing this, right? Creating the enhanced recruiter experience, right? Almost the Yelp of recruiting through like a Great Recruiters, awesome technology, by the way. But all of that is to create that awareness, that brand awareness, right? And make sure that we're attracting and retaining our client and our talent. So there's a lot of that going on in the industry. And I preach to my clients that, hey, if you're ever happy to talk about that more, I'll connect you to the right people. So anyways, and my doorbell's ringing. So life at home with COVID.
Do you need to get that?
No.
Okay. I know, life at home. It could be worse. You could be stuck as a cat, right? That's great advice, and getting started. And like you said, failing forward and just doing something. For a small company that's looking at this and they're saying, I've never really focused on digital before. And you said, let's focus on those metrics. Who inside would you make in charge if they don't have a marketing person per se? If they just have interns, who would you make in charge of it? Who would you make own that project?
Yeah. So when you talk about, again, I'll parlay this back to EOS to answer your question, right? It goes back to who owns it on the accountability chart. So who owns sales and marketing? And that really becomes the biggest question in my mind. And a lot of times you might see in smaller organizations where the integrator or the visionary wants to own it. And then you got to ask the question, well, why isn't the marketing seat, the person who owns sales and marketing, own it? And I'll tell you, in a smaller organization too, a lot of times that person who is a visionary might also sit in the sales and marketing seat. So, but you have to answer who's the best person, right? From a resource constraint, bandwidth, all that kind of good stuff. Who's the best and brightest to own that particular engagement or rock? And you answer your question from there. So if they've got someone who's like a VP of sales or someone that can truly own that, then that person would get it. Otherwise, right, you'll see someone who, like the integrator, they'll say like, sorry, this project is so important, we can't mess it up and we don't have the expertise beneath us. You got to take it. And I've seen that happen a lot of times too. So it really ultimately depends on who is the right person to own that. And I would typically see it at a higher level. It is definitely like someone on the senior team that owns that type of a project.
Now let's look at what are the big opportunities. Everything's shifted because of COVID, because of the pandemic. I'm sure, I mean, there's been massive disruption across the place and massive opportunities laid out too. Where, you're talking to a lot of staffing companies. Where do you see the big marketing and sales opportunities that maybe people aren't taking advantage of right now in the staffing industry?
Yep. Everyone's talking about automation. I mean, it's such a again, this is going to be a huge shift in the industry in the next 5 years. And when you talk about technology in general, right, more robotic process automation, right, more HubSpots of the world, those types of technologies, and staffing, the two players are Herefish and Sense, right? Those are two big players. But that idea of automation, so again, enhancing the client and candidate experience is going to be crucial. So what are the things, right, that you can pay, a technology, if you will, right, to do those functions, that $10 an hour type of work that's repetitive and consistent, so that you can elevate and enhance the value of your recruiter and your salespeople and what they're doing. So all the things that they're doing, right, to get people in the door, all that sourcing, I think you're going to see a big shift eventually where a lot of that type of stuff gets automated. So that is heavy in the industry right now. Tech in general, because it's going to be this big shift. When you think about like a Shift Gig, or you think about Uber Works and the things that they're doing, there's some cool technologies in staffing that are emerging that are going to do some really cool on-demand type of stuff when it comes from a labor perspective. So now from a marketing engine, right, how do we take that and layer on so that we can create more efficiencies with some of the responsibilities that our recruiters are doing? So again, stop spending a ton of time doing sourcing. Let the chat bots, if you will, do that for you, and so that they can do higher value, higher dollar activities and get those people placed faster.
That's great advice. So let's talk a little bit about you. I mean, obviously, you're doing a lot. You're working with staffing companies. How do you personally now help staffing companies through EOS?
Yeah. So right, typical thing as an EOS implementer, help companies essentially get what they want out of their business, and that can mean so many things. The tagline is, "What do you do?" I help organizations get what they want out of their business, and we talk about, we help companies 10x growth. Well, what does that mean? That can take a lot of different angles. That doesn't always have to be tied to revenue, but how do I help organizations? Right, I work with them to essentially understand, teach, coach, facilitate this EOS framework and methodology, right? Timeless concepts, simple tools, disciplines, et cetera, accountability. Wrap that all up into this amazing framework that Gino and EOS Worldwide constructed over the years, to really help them, right, get a clear vision in the organization, be able to cascade that down, right, instill discipline and accountability, because a lot of these organizations become very loyal to their people. And then, right, we accept mediocre results because sometimes we don't know what awesome really looks like. And then, creating that healthy, cohesive leadership team and distilling all that down. So we have a mission, right, from EOS, that we want to help these organizations get to where they want to go, live a healthier life, live the EOS life, if you will, right? Do what you love with the people you love and all that kind of good stuff, right? That's our mission out there, is to bring this to the world and help these companies get their structure right, their vision, and then be able to execute on that 100%.
And how long, I think this is a big thing, is how long and how much effort does it take to get EOS working well for a staffing company? I know it's a loaded question, but I think like you said with marketing before, they don't give it enough time. Yeah. And then people, it's like 3 months later, marketing's not working. Oh, we're done. Marketing didn't work for us. I think same thing with EOS, right? It's definitely not a 90-day thing. You're going to transform your business in 90 days.
Right. No, that's a great question. I think, one of the things I've become brutally honest when I'm talking to folks out there who are interested, want to learn more about EOS is just, how serious are you about this thing, right? And if you don't believe and you don't practice those disciplines, and then you don't push this down into your organization, it's not going to work as well, right? And you're going to be at it for years and years. But if you're dedicated to understanding that this is going to be a little bit disruptive, There's going to be some change coming. It's great change. It's healthy change. There's going to be some pain, but in the long run, you're going to see how this plays out and helps your organization scale, right? And that's what we teach for these 5 leadership abilities and how we help organizations overcome any obstacle, right, as they hit ceilings differently in their business. And so, what we're really trying to do is work with a client over 2 years, right? A 2-year journey to get 80% strong or better in the EOS model, right? And be able to assess how well they're doing it so that they can take it and run with it from there, right? Would they need a health checkup every once in a while? That's their choice, right? Probably 50% of the time clients stay on for 2 years and we graduate them on and they're living EOS and doing a great thing. The other 50% of the time, there's probably a 10% of the time area where folks drop off somewhere in that one or 2 years. And then there's probably somewhere between 20 and 30% of folks that stay on long-term with clients because they see this tremendous value in the facilitation side of it and the accountability side of being pure to EOS. And so the answer isn't such a easy, cookie cutter answer. It really does depend, but I would say at a minimum, it's somewhere around 2 years, right? Because it just takes that discipline, that muscle memory to get this moving in the right direction.
Fantastic. Well, I mean, I think that's important. Like you said, if you're committed, you got to think 2 years, but either 2 years from now, you're going to be in the same place or worse, or 2 years from now, you're going to have gone through it all and have an incredible business that you love. Like you said, the EOS life, you're going to implement the right marketing campaigns, the right structure, learn how to learn from your marketing, which I think has been a big theme. It's like, hey, marketing, which I always talk about, but there's no silver bullet. It's learning what works for you, your agent, your staffing company, whatever. That's great. So let's talk about working with you specifically. How do I get in touch with you? Where's the best place to learn more about working with Derek?
Yeah, no, thanks so much. So you can find me on the EOS Worldwide website in the Implementer directory. My company, right, Blueprint Vision Group. You can find me on that website, LinkedIn, of course. One of those 3 areas to generally get in touch with me, or you can certainly send me an email at derek@blueprintvisiongroup.com.
Awesome. Fantastic. Derek, this has been great. I appreciate you being on and telling us all about EOS and staffing and marketing.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ian. I appreciate the time.
And thank you all for listening to me and Derek and taking us on your journey. Make sure to take action. Make sure to check Derek out, and make sure to go check out our sponsor, storycruise.com, to find videographers that know marketing, know business, and some that know EOS.
Awesome. Thanks so much.